知识就是力量，信息就是财富。欢迎收看《地产世界》。2020年是充满挑战的一年，全球大流行加上经济衰退，已经使很多人感到了痛苦。但是这也促成了更多的美国人重新考虑家的含义，能够找一个更好的满足人们需求的地方，加上创纪录的低抵押贷款利率，使购房者的需求激增。在目前供不应求的市场上，需求的增加引发更多的竞购战，导致房价大幅上涨。因此有些人现在对于购买房屋持谨慎的态度。今天我们请来了著名经济学家 Chris 博士和顶级的地产商 Cindy 给我们深度解说一下疫情之下美国经济衰退还是复苏，地产的未来走势又如何。你好 Chris， 你好
Cindy。Hello， Hi Ray。
首先呢 Cindy 为我们介绍一下他的好朋友著名的经济学家 Chris 博士。
Yeah，Chris，我们认识有很多年了，大概有20多年的那个交情。他当时还是在 UCLA 做教授，那个时候我还在富达投资公司工作。那个时候所以说已经有差不多10几年、20年的交情。然后我是邀请他来讲座呢，也就是给大家一个宏观，不仅仅是说微观，而且是宏观的经济学的角度来讲一讲这个现在的疫情情况下的经济状况，包括房地产。因为他的 bio Chris 的 bio 非常非常长，我怕为了不让遗漏任何重点，所以我还特意把它写了一下，我大概给大家念一下。他是呢，他自己创立了公司，公司名字叫做 Beacon Economics， 也可以看到他的后屏幕上面有写 Beacon Economics。他是公司的创始合伙人，还是加州大学河滨分校的商学院经济预测和发展中心的主任，以及学院的兼职教授。2008年、2012年的话呢，他担任了加州州长办公室的首席经济顾问，而且还担任了 John Chen， 大家应该有些人了解John Chen， 他是那个经济顾问委员会主席的那个顾问。然后的话呢，他更重要、更厉害的一点是在2008年，他到2012年、14年，他是 John Paulson 的首席经济顾问。当时的话呢，就帮 John Paulson 就是有对冲基金创下了49个亿的那个收益。这个的话也是，所以说非常就是一战成名嘛，可以说是 Chris， 通过那个 Housing Bubble， 2008年的 Housing Bubble， 他一战成名，所以说非常非常有名。他经常上那个 CNN、CNBC 和 Fox News， 还有 LA News 的那些众多的电视采访，而且他的学术报告也经常被《华尔街日报》纽约时报、芝加哥文摘洛杉矶时报等等，经常的会这个摘录，所以他呢。就是名气在房地产界是非常非常大的。不仅如此的话，他还经常受邀去参加那个科威地产，我不知道大家了解不了解Coldwell Banker， 包括那个加州地产协会，他们每年的年会都经常会邀请他去做嘉宾，主要的那个 keynote speaker， 所以说他是非常非常有名的。今天也非常有幸邀请 Chris 来加入我们这个访谈，因为平常的话，说实在话，他的出场费都是至少几万美刀出。我记得上次3万到5万美刀，他出席一次，所以说的话，这次是免费跟我们出镜所以说非常感谢 Chris。So thank you, Chris, so much for to join us today. 那我们的话 ，Yeah, thank you. So 那我们的话就可以直接切入主题吧，那 Chris。
好，没问题就请 Chris 为我们讲解一下马上当前的经济还市场的预测，好吧
？Yeah, Chris. So let's get started first with the slides you have prepared for this interview.
That sounds great.
You want to go to
good to be here, Cindy. Nice to be back, to say the least. Let's go ahead and to the next slide here.
第一页。
好，第一页。
Right. So listen, when we're thinking about the economy and we're thinking about what's going to happen next, particularly when it comes to housing, my comments can really come in three big things to think about.
他的意思就是说呢。但对于当前的经济形势的话，它主要说的是3个主要的主题，分为3个主题。简单来说
，The first thing is, as tragic as the COVID-19 pandemic was, it was in many ways a natural disaster. Now, obviously, it's a tragic situation for the families who've lost loved ones, but at the same time, the economic shock created by the natural disaster is nowhere near as tense as what happened at the beginning of the Great Recession. As such, we were never anticipating any kind of recession like what happened back in 2008 and 2009.
我总结一下，我不是事事半夜观，但是的话，我大概总结一下 Chris 刚才讲的， 就是说呢，这个病毒呢，它是相当于一个自然灾害，就有点像，比如说是那个飓风啊或者地震，它是一个自然灾害类型的那个，就是说一个危机吧，所以它对经济的造成的影响是非常短暂的，不会是有长久的影响。这个的话跟那个2008年就是1930年的那个大萧条经济大萧条来比的话，这个根本就是不足挂齿吧，可以说根本没有相比的那个可能性，就是太小了，怎么说，用中文说是不足一提了，就是没有办法去相提并论。
不值一提，
对，因为这个差得太远了，就是1930年的大萧条和现在当前的经济危机的话，不是同一个 category，不是同一个类别。
The second big thing to take away is that while this was never going to be a long recession, nevertheless, the politics of the United States created a situation by which the monetary and fiscal policy put into place to combat the downturn was in many ways excessive. Now, what this means is that the economy is going to bounce back very, very quickly, but that excessive monetary and fiscal policy could in fact create problems in the next expansion.
总结来说的话，它的第二个主题呢，就是说，虽然说我们经历这个危机的话，其实这是自然灾害造成的危机，它其实可以自然的自己反弹回来。但是呢，政府呢就造成那些，就是因为民众恐慌，然后政府大力的支持，所以政府呢给了在很多财政和金融方面的支持和帮助的话，就是过多了，就是 excessive， 就是 overkill，它是过多反而就会长期来说反而会造成更多的就是那个负面影响，就比如说那个通货膨胀。或者是高利率，这些都是潜在的一些危机。这不是说因为这个什么这个病毒产生的，而是因为政府过多的干涉而造成这样的问题。
And then last but not least, it's important to keep in mind there are a lot of people out there who like to talk about this pandemic creating some new normal or fundamentally changing people's behavior. That's not the case. This pandemic is just one of many epidemics that have been with humanity since the dawn of civilization. What this will do is accelerate underlying trends that were already in place. For example, the trend towards people buying stuff online, thus, of course, having a bad impact on the demand for retail space.
OK， 他的意思就是说，这种病毒的情况呢，又不是第一次，在人类历史之前的话，很多年的话都有这种情况，就是病毒发生。像以前好像我记得有个什么黑那个什么 black illness right， 有一种那种黑
死病啊之类的，
对，就有点类似像这样，所以这不是第一次发生，这也不是世界末日。他的意思呢，就是因为病毒的产生这个危机的话，这个病毒的产生的话，使原来本有的一些存在的一些问题的话，就更加加速的扩大化了。他举了个例子，比如说像以前的话呢，在没有病毒、没有那个COVID 或 pandemic 之前的话，像那些零售行业就已经受到影响了，因为很多都已经开始在电商。在网上购物了，所以说电商已经慢慢转型成为电商，所以说这个因为 pandemic 的话，现在大家都在家里 就是叫做 shelter in place right， 那这样的话就使那个电商的业务的话就加速的扩大化了，所以说就造成了像现在的话就是那个 retail， 就像那些零售店的话，它受到很大的重创。它只是说这个 pandemic 不是因为这个原因而产生的，而本身就存在的问题，只是因为这个 pandemic 的话让它加速的扩大化的而发展。Okay, Chris, you want to go to the next one?
Next slide, yes, please.
Please. 下一页。
Now, what this slide is really the path of the U.S. economy coming into the beginning of 2021. And the thing to keep in mind here is that recovery has already largely occurred. This recession began in February of 2020 and it ended in April. And since that point in time, we've already rebounded by 70% from where we were back there at the bottom.
他就说的话，这个其实我们已经处于在复苏的那个状态中了。他说，真正的话来说，你可以从那个图上 ，Chris 准备的这个 slide 上可以看得到，真正的话，他那个 recession 或所谓的 recession 的话，其实就是在去年的3、4、5月份，你可以看那个数据可以看得出来。去年的3、4、5月份这几个月份的话是受的重创，也是受到了影响最大的时候。然后你就可以看这些市场一直在往回反弹的话，现在到目前为止，他认为基本上是70%的已经差不多回来了。
Now, the important thing to keep in mind here is this recovery occurred while we were still battling the pandemic. The good news, of course, is the pandemic is largely behind the United States right now, with, of course, the wide-scale rollout of vaccinations. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me.
Tia，下一张。他刚刚说的那一段话，其实 说他刚刚说的那段话，其实就是要强调一下这个很大的一部分的原因的话，也就是因为那个 vaccination 就是疫苗的出现，然后这样的话，这个疫情就受到控制，所以说经济的话，它的反弹的话也会有正面的对那个经济反弹有正面的影响。
Since the vaccination started being rolled out in January, the number of new cases in the United States has fallen by 75%. At this point in time, they're expecting every adult in the United States to have access to a vaccine by May. What this means is by the second half of this year, all these restrictions being created by COVID are going to be gone, and the U.S. economy is going to be quickly getting back onto a normal path.
OK， 我总结一下，他刚才说的话，就是因为疫苗的出现的话呢，就是它这个就是受感染率的话降低了75%，我要是没听错的话，好像刚才是说降低了75%，而且到今年5月份的话，应该大多数的成年人都会接受到疫苗，那到年底的话呢，就应该基本上可以就往回弹，或者是说正常化了，步入正轨了。
Go next slide, please.
来下一页。
So now the real question is how strong will the economy be when we get past COVID? And this goes back to the excessive fiscal and monetary policy. The important point to keep in mind here is that the fiscal policy has injected $5 trillion of spending into the U.S. economy. That's equivalent to 25% of 1 year of output.
他的意思就是说呢，就是从Chris, I was just a little bit glitch here of my brain, actually.
Okay, that's okay. So the whole idea here is that the federal government spent $5 trillion on the 3 stimulus plans.
Okay.
And that $5 trillion is larger than any stimulus plan ever considered in the United States as a percent of GDP.
Right. So basically saying, oh, I'm speaking English to you now. I forgot to translate. 他的意思就是说呢，政府的给的那个经济刺激的那个计划呢，是达到了5.1兆亿，5.1兆亿相当于就是美国的总产值的25%，这也是说在美国历史上最大的一个经济刺激计划。OK。
For every dollar of lost income caused by the recession, the U.S. government gave people more than $2 back.
他说每1元的话，就是你如果受损失，因为这个疫情的情况，你受损失了1美元的话，政府补贴你2块多美元，也就是说政府就是过多的去去参与或者干涉，给予那个经济刺激。
Click to the next slide.
Next.
好，下一页。
And you can see this in the U.S. economy. On the left-hand side is overall commercial bank deposits. They are currently $2 trillion over trend. That is to say, there is $2 trillion of excess money sitting in the U.S. banking system right now.
他说的话就是现在国民的那个存钱的非常高，就存钱率就是 savings 存钱储蓄率非常高，是2 billion. You said 2 trillion or 2 billion?
2 trillion.
Trillion. 哦哇，就2兆亿的那个存钱那个数量。
Yeah, and most of that is U.S. household savings. American households last year saved $1.2 trillion. Sorry, 2 years ago, they saved $1.2 trillion. Last year, they put away $2.9 trillion.
Did you say 1.3 trillion before?
It was 1.2 trillion.
1.2 trillion and 2.9
in 2019 and 2.9 trillion in 2020.
OK， 就是说从那个存钱的储蓄角度来说的话，就是国民大众的话，在2年前它的储蓄大概是1.3兆亿，然后的话去年的话是应该是2.9兆亿，也就是说的话2倍多，超过2倍多，它的那个储蓄量。Yes.
Next slide, please.
好，下一页。
Now, when you see this big bounce back in the economy, you see it also in various forms of investment. For example, while some parts of the U.S. economy still are underperforming by the end of 2020, if you look at investments in information technology, investments in software, they were way up from the previous year. But one of the sectors that was one of the fastest growing in 2020 was the housing sector, housing investment.
那这个它slide主要讲的是什么呢？就是现在国民的储蓄量这么高，数量这么高，它主要是用于哪里呢？而且就是不能够出门消费，right？ 所以说的话，它就举例了，就是3个现在就是说大家把钱投在哪里， 第一个呢是 information equipment， 就是说那种像跟高科技有关的。第二个就是 residential 其实就是什么？就是大家买房，就是房买那个住宅房或者是投资房。第三个是 software， 就是软件。那我们关注的就是 residential housing， 你可以看是前3名，排名前3名就是国民将储蓄用在哪里？就是买房，基本上。
Go to the next slide.
买房。好，下一页。
And you can see all this in the housing market. You can see why this jumps so much. On the left-hand side, of course, is the big bounce in existing home sales, which right now is running 6 million units per year. That's on par with the peak during the pre-Great Recession housing market bubble.
So this one, I always forget I'm translating because I keep thinking I'm chatting with you. 他的意思就是说呢，这个就是房地产的话，就是供应和需求不平衡。那现在你看的话，它现在的供给量就是在去年8月份，它的那个 inventory 它是只有2个月的储备量，而它的那个什么需求量是非常高的，所以说它等于是基本上是不到那个需求量的1/5或者1/4吧，所以也就是说供不应求，简短来说就是供不应求。从这个图上来说。
And what's interesting is that we've also seen a jump in new home sales. And, you know, there's some huge amount of demand has occurred in a period of time where the housing market was already quite tight. One result of that is this has become the tightest housing market the United States has seen, at least by month's supply of inventory for sale, than we've ever seen in the US.
Right. 而且他说的话，你可以看这里的话，就从2005年，从这个 chart 上面图表上可以看得出来，自从最高点原来是2005年，它的什么 new home 就是新房销售的那个高度哈，它的销售总量。然后的话，现在的话到了2020年的话，就是等于是可以基本上是要赶上那个2005年的那个新房销售总量的那个趋势了。你看它的直接往上窜，你看这个高度还是挺高的，直接往上窜 shoot up。所以说它这个意思就是说呢，这个新房的销售量是非常看好的。
Next slide. Next slide.
Next slide, Tia, please.
Oops, I think we went one too much. Go back one.
来上一个。
There you go. Perfect. And of course, you can see this in home prices. We came into the pandemic with the housing market soft and home price growth only running about 2 to 3% year over year. By the end of 2020, price growth had accelerated to 10% on a year over year basis. And of course, the strongest markets for the most part are out here in the West, places like Phoenix, Seattle, and of course, San Diego.
它这张图表的话，基本上就是告诉你，它这个就是房价涨幅是哪个地方涨幅的最高。他呢，其实我这个之前也跟他调侃过，就是那个他呢现在也他本身也在做房地产投资，他有一部分房地产投资就在 Phoenix， 在那个 Arizona 亚利桑那州。因为什么呢？他就是根据他的这些数据，像亚利桑那州的话，那个 Phoenix 它的涨幅，房地产的涨幅是14.4%。我刚才也看了一下，就是这个洛杉矶的涨幅是9.9%，哈，基本也不差，将近10%了，也挺好的。但当然你要就说按排名来说，最好的还是 Phoenix， 还有西雅图和圣地亚哥这几个地方的话是涨幅最高的地方。
Next slide. And of course, here in California specifically, the situation is particularly acute. While we have about 2 months supply at the national level, there's only 1 month supply here in California. And that's a result, of course, of the combination of the housing shortage that really has been an acute part of the California housing market for over a decade, combined with, of course, this frenzy to get into homes.
他的意思就是说，在美国整个国家的平均水平来说的话，它的那个供给的话是2个月的 supply， 它的那个就是它的那个inventory。就是它的那个存货量是2个月的 supply， 但是呢，在加州这个存货量它是更低了，只有1个月的 supply， 1个月的供给量。所以说的话，加州为什么会有这种情况呢？他刚才大概简要的说了一下，主要呢就是因为加州的话呢，它这个本来就是那个房子供不应求，就是已经极其短缺了，再加上加州的那个政府它的各种的规章制度或者是 regulation 非常严格，包括租赁啊，或者是说审批啊，非常非常严。所以这样的话呢，就是很多开发商的话也没有办法开发一 一些大的项目，或者是说开发很多项目来补充这个空缺，所以这就造成了它那个什么供不应求更加匮乏的情况。你可以看这个右边的图的话，它这就显示到它这个就是人均的那个房屋量的话是非常非常低的。我从这个图上看的话，好像加州是排名倒数第二。就在整个美国的话，它是排名第二，就是它的那个供房人均量是最低的那个百分比来说的是排名倒数第二，就说明它严重短缺。对，所以说什么都是根据数据来说的话，这就说明加州的话还是有它上升的空间的，因为它根本就不够。那就是看加州的政府能不能够放松一些政策的话，能够让这个就是开发商能够开发或者建商建更多的房子来补充这个缺口。
Next slide.
好。
Now, of course, with all this activity in housing, the question in everybody's mind, is this a bubble? In other words, is this frenzy going to be followed by a crash? The answer is no, it's not a bubble, at least not yet. Remember, over the past decade in the US, there's been a very moderate increase in mortgage debt, and interest rates have come down quite a bit. You want to go ahead and translate that, and then I'll finish up.
I was going to remind you to say we can stop right there. Okay, so 它这个话就左边的这个 slide， 它的意思就是说呢，就是美国的房地产的泡沫会不会来到就像那个2008年一样，会不会有这样的泡沫经济？他的 answer， 他的回答就是说是不会有的，至少目前没有这个泡沫的迹象。然后他就说要说右边，他当然还没解释啊，当时。Okay, Chris, do you want to explain the right side of the chart?
Yeah, so on the left-hand side here, this is the aggregate mortgage payments in the United States as a percent of income. That is to say, how much all Americans are spending of their income on housing payments. Prior to the Great Recession, that was an all-time high, above 7% of national disposable income. Coming into the pandemic, we were at a record low 4%. And because of all the refinancing going on at even lower interest rates, it is now only 3.5%, less than half of what it was prior to the Great Depression.
OK， 好像 Chris 还在讲左边这个图哈，那我再解释一下。如果大家不知道这个 DPI 什么意思呢 ？DPI 的意思就叫做 Disposable Personal Income。Disposable Personal Income 简短来说，也就是一个人的家庭收入。简说的话，就家庭收入叫 DPI。它的意思就是说的话呢。根据这个这个图你可以看到，2008年的话是就是说大家付那个贷款按揭，或者是付房费啊，或者是整个那个什么持有成本那些整个加起来的话，是占有它的 DPI 的最高达到7%，它这里上面写7%，然后到了2020年的话，基本上降到差不多3.75左右吧。也就是说的话，这意思就是说。那个你付那个贷款或者是跟房子有关的这些费用的这些比例，占你的家庭收入的比例就越来越低了。如果低的话，就说明你能够什么，你不能够支付的那个能力，就是这个就什么，就这个可能性非常小了。就说明的话，也就是说你不可能说没有足够的钱去付了，因为它占有你的家庭收入的比例低，就说明你很大的可能话你是能够支付得起的，就这个意思。
You talked a lot longer than me. I'm worried about what you're saying. Anyway.
No, I mean, Chris.
Anyway, let me explain.
Yeah.
The point here, very simple, is this: housing is not expensive in the United States right now. Housing is quite cheap. That means when you get right down to it, the price increases you're seeing are perfectly reasonable. In fact, there's a lot more space for prices to go up before it becomes expensive. And one way to see that is by looking at the debt markets.
Hold on, let me explain.
Okay,
because I had to explain the definition of DPI. That's why it took longer.
That's fine. No worries.
And what DPI stands for.
Don't worry.
So basically, what you're saying is that because the income, what you just said, right? Is the
yeah, because mortgage payments as a percent of income are really low. This is cheap housing.
对房地产的话，相对来说的话还是比较便宜的。就是说，他并不认为就是在加州这个房产的话，其实有那么贵。他的意思就是说的话，相对来说，其实相对加州的收入，或者是总体的家庭收入，或者是他的经济能力，这个房地产的这个价位还是比较属于算是很合理的。也就是说的话，还是有上涨空间的。
And to be clear, for all the tough times the U.S. has been through over the last year, there's been no hint of problems in our mortgage markets. In fact, mortgage delinquencies are down, not up. So anybody who thinks they're going to buy a foreclosed unit, forget about it.
他说现在的话就是可以看到右边的这个图，他的意思就是说这个就是大家的话就是有这个贷款按揭，如果是付不起的那个可能性比较小，你可以看它90天有3个月，如果是延迟没有付那个贷款的话，它这个比例是非常低的，几乎你看这个。2020年3月2020年的数据，它这个是非常非常低，可能也就1%-2%，相对于2010年或者2010年可以看最高是相当于24%吧。所以说这个的话就可以明显的可以告诉你，就是说这个 foreclosure 或者是说那种 foreclosure， 我一下突然忘记这个 foreclosure 那个 rate 那个中文怎么解释来着？我忘了那个专业术语用中文怎么翻译，应该是就是那个短售房吧，应该是
短售房，对的。
或者是那个叫那个
然后法拍屋啊，
法拍屋，对，
法拍屋
专业术语忘了，那个法拍屋，它那个可能性非常小。之前我们说了可能会有一些，但是真的不多，就是说不是遍地开花的情况，
就是很少，明白？
非常少，对对。Okay, the last slide, please.
来，最后一张。
So what could slow this market down? Well, the obvious answer is interest rates. Now, interest rates have been coming up in the United States, but it's not inflation, at least not yet. This is just the US economy returning to normal. And it's doubtful that this increase in interest rates will cool the housing market off very sharply right now.
还有这个利率的话往上涨的话，其实不是往上涨，它只是回到应该有的那个正常状态。所以说的话，你说它就是说往上回弹的话，大家会很紧张的话就没有必要了。
But obviously, you have to keep an eye out for the future. One of the downsides of this excessive fiscal and monetary policy is the potential for inflation in a few years. However, it's probably worth noting that real estate is a good inflation hedge. That is to say, while it may cool off in terms of a sales situation if inflation picks up because of uncertainty, nevertheless, as a store of wealth while prices are going up, it performs very, very well.
The last part I didn't quite get it, but
well, I mean, if inflation's 10%, the value of houses go up 10%. So it's a good store. It's like putting your money into gold in inflation. It goes along with it.
Oh, I see.
Transaction volume tend to go down because obviously interest rates are adjusting and the markets get a little skittish. So there's less liquidity, but as a store of value, it's very good.
Right. OK， 我总结说一下，他的意思就是说利息会往上走，但是呢，利息往上走的话，并不是说它会怎么样 crazy， 只是说会把这个房市的话会降温一些而已，并不是说会那个怎么很大的去 impact 那个房市。而且他说的话，房地产对那个房市的话呢，房地产对那个什么利息，就是说通货膨胀还是一个非常好的一个屏蔽或者规避。或者是预防的一个方式，因为什么呢？因为他说的话，就像那个房地产就像黄金一样的，他刚刚举的例子就像黄金一样，那个价值跟着那个就水涨船高。他就说这个利息往上涨的话，那个房地产的那个价值也往上走。他刚刚举的例子就是说，如果是说利息往上涨，比如说 10% 或怎么样，好像他是这个意思。然后的话，他的那个房地产的那个价值也会 appreciate 10%， 就是跟他一起走。那他们是同一个方向一起走，所以这个的话是一个很好的规避，就是说你不会贬值，就这个意思。你的房地产，虽然说他说的缺点呢，就是房地产它的那个流动性比较低，它没有太多的那个 liquidity， 但是它的那个，但是还是非常保值的。也就换句话来说，就非常保值。
Yeah. So we can go ahead into the last slide, and I can give you a little concluding statement.
Yeah. Last slide.
So. In general, here's the message. Housing's going to be hot for a few years, and it's a sustainable market rise. Yes, in a few years, things are going to cool off. Maybe they won't. Maybe it'll turn into a bubble. But at least for the next few years, I think it's a good time to be invested in real estate, given, of course, what I see as a generally sustainable upside for the market, as noted, for at least the next few years.
他说利息在几年之后可会往上走，但是他说的话，在这接下来几年的话是不会有那个房地产泡沫。他认为房地产还是很好的一个投资的方式、投资的渠道或者是方式。
好，
OK。
最后呢 ，Thank you Chris， 谢谢 Cindy 啊，这个为我们做这样的一些介绍。那下面是来自观众的一些问题，我们解答一下，请 Chris 还有 Cindy。就是首先第一个问题，利率处于历史低位，我们都知道失业率现在飙升，债务呢飙升，通货膨胀显然是不可避免的。尤其是我们知道第3轮经济刺激法已经通过了，那我们应该期待经济衰退还是复苏呢？应该做些什么准备呢？
Okay, Chris, now we're going to the next phase, which is we're going to answer some questions from the audience. So
Okay.
first question is, interest rate is being historically low, unemployment rate is soaring, debt is skyrocketing, inflation is obviously inevitable. So should we expect an economic recession or recovery, and what should we do to be prepared?
Well, I already answered a lot of that.
I
The
know,
first thing to keep in
summarize.
mind is inflation is not soaring and unemployment is not going up. Unemployment has come down quite a bit and inflation is still quite tame. The US economy is already in a recovery mode and will be recovered for a while.
OK， 他说他刚才的话讲他的那个 presentation 的时候，已经回答了大多数的问题。他说的话呢，那个就是失业率不是那么高，不是大家想象的那么高，而且的话 inflation 也不会是那么 crazy， 也不会是那么怎么说呢 out of line。他的话呢，他说我们已经在那个 recovery， 已经在复苏的阶段了，所以不存在那个 recession。
哦，明白。好，感谢 Cindy 啊，感谢 Chris。还有呢，就是第二个问题，我们看一下，就是房地产市场火热，你知道很多房子都在溢价出售，就是关于它假设放在是100万嘛，但是到最后成交可能变成110万了。所以在这种情况下，我们现在应该是买房子，还是说等等以后再买房子呢？
So the next question is, the real estate market is sizzling hot right now. So many homes are getting bidded up. Sold at much higher price. And the example range just to share with us is a $1 million house getting, put on the market for sale, and then the price end up selling at 1.1 million. So it's much higher than the asking price. So should we just wait to buy later or now?
As noted, the price growth you've seen is sustainable. Prices are still low relative to the cost of housing. And as such, no, I don't think you should wait. The prices are not going to come down anytime in the near future.
他说的话不应该等，要买的话就快买。他说的话，现在就是说房价虽然说可能说是 bid up， 但是他说相对它的那个 cost of construction is it cost of construction or cost of
The cost of housing relative to people's incomes. Remember that debt payment?
OK， 他说的话跟那 cost of housing 就是说这个就是购房的这个价位，或者是我不知道这 cost of housing 怎么去翻译啊？就意义应该是意义，就是说真正长远来说呢，这个就是这个费用或者是购买的费用，其实现在的价钱还不是到它最高点，还是很 reasonable。他说还是应该是现在就尽快的，如果能买房就买房。我只是翻译哈，大家不要扔砖给我，认为我是房地产商的话，所以要开砖给我。我只是翻译。
Chris 是经济学家，我们都知道。下一个问题就是关于这个卖房的问题了。我们知道现在是卖方市场嘛，所以卖房子的好时机。然而，我现在也担心啊，是一个高价格购买一个替代的房产，毕竟必须有地方住嘛。所以说，如果是这种情况下，我现在是应该延迟或者推迟卖自己房子吗
？So the next question is it's seller's market right now, and so to most sellers, it's great time to sell. However, most of sellers' concern is if they buy, once they sell the house, they have to buy a replacement property. And so would they be buying, obviously they will be buying at a higher point, based on their perception, right? So that's why they're a little hesitating about selling. Do you think it's a good time to sell as well?
Yeah. Well, again, it depends what you're selling for. If you're selling because you think it's the top of the market, you're wrong. If you're selling to move into another unit, well, that's a perfectly reasonable choice to make because, again, this price growth we're seeing now is sustainable. It's going to carry on for a while, and you're not going to lose any money on that new unit you bought.
Okay. 他的意思就是说，你不用等了。如果你要看你是要卖这房子以什么目的啊 ，selling for。然后他说，如果你要卖的话，现在也并不是说真正的最高点。他说，你即便现在卖的话，你再去买的话，你的房子你买的那个房子还是可以会增值的。所以说他的意思就是说，你要卖的话，也不需要去那个需要等。OK，
明白。好，
谢。You those questions really fast 。
是我们简单啊，把这个问题啊给解答好，好吧？下一个就是高房价，我们知道现在很多贵的房子啊，市场低迷，那卖家是否现在应该等到经济完全复苏再购入房产呢？如果是这样，您认为这个美国经济多久能回到正轨呢
哇，这个问题 OK， 你的问题就是说 OK 高房价。
嗯，
So the question
对，
range is for the high price point homes. So high price point homes, especially the ones above, let's say, 3, 5, or even $10 million plus homes, especially in Newport Coast, it's very expensive. So do you think for those high price point home sellers, should they actually hold back, wait until the market back on track, and to sell? Because right now they have to sell at discount because not too many buyers for this market segment.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I don't follow the ultra luxury market that much. But the data suggests that actually that part of the market has been picking up some steam relative to where it was, say, a year and a half ago. Now, again, if we're talking in the 10 million plus range, that's a very small exclusive market. I don't track it. But I do know that the higher end homes are seeing more sales. You see that in the fact that the median price of homes is growing faster than, say, the quality adjusted price. So you are seeing more action at the top end. And, that's a sign, again, of the rebound in overall financial wealth in the United States, whether you're talking about the stock market and its all-time highs it's getting close to, and of course, various other sorts of things, such as these low interest rates that are continuing to be pushed by the Federal Reserve.
OK， 哇，我总结一下，那个有点长。他的意思就是说的话呢，他不是特别的专注，或者是关注很多那个高价房位的那个高价房的那个市场。但是呢，就根据他的观察的话，就是最近的这个高价房的销售的话，比前1、2年的话要好一些，就是说比前几年要好一些。估计的话呢，可能就是因为低利率吧。而且的话，据我自己个人经验的话，就是也有很多那些富豪的话呢，他们也开始就是说呢，因为因为疫情，也希望在那个周边或者是比较怎么说呢，不在 downtown 啊，或者是像纽约啊，还有旧金山或者是 LA 的一些 downtown，比如是丽山庄的一些豪宅，据我所知，他们也都开始向郊区在买高价房了。这市场不是说特别大，因为它毕竟是小众人群才能购买得了。像1000万以上的房子，但是的话，相对1、2年前的话，还是有提升的。
来，我们看一下这个 GRA Happy 啊，我们这网友问呢，说是可以预估低利率会保持多久呢？现在我们知道低利率是很多人购房的一个这个就是导火索吧，就是因为利率比较低，所以这个利率会多长时间会上升呢？你怎么看
？Oh, so the questions from the audience are live right now. Actually, just I think text the rain is that would like to see if you can predict how long this low interest rate will last.
Well, they're coming up a bit. Right, already. We know that the bond market's getting back to normal. So again, that's one reason to get out there now and get these rates before they go up too much. So I do think that from here on, for the next couple of years, they will slowly drift up. The big risk for folks is to think out maybe 2-3 years. If the Fed doesn't back off and inflation does start to kick in, rates could go up pretty sharply. But that's something that would happen 2023, 2024. Again, if you're thinking long run, if you're thinking about the cost of leverage, this is a good time to get in.
OK， 总结一下，他的意思就是说呢，现在利率的话已经有点稍稍往上扬了，已经往上在走了。他说的话，接下来两三年，刚好说2-3年的话，应该没有太大动作。但是它一旦往回弹的话，它这个回弹是非常 sharp， 也就是说会弹得非常快、非常高。不会是说你一点点的弹，往上反弹。他说到2023年、2024年的话，它要反弹的话，利率会非常高。假设说，我举个例子啊，给你就是现在比如说是3%的话，它反弹高，也许一下就涨到5%或涨6%，它不会说3.5或者3.27或者3.75这样的涨，它都是非常 sharp， 就是我要演示，就是说它是比较高的、快的。那个反弹，
很快的回弹，是，就包括其实刚才 Chris 也是在讲嘛，说是关于现在利率啊，主要是太低了，它可能回弹一个比较正常的一个水平，是吧？
对，因为它反弹到了原来的 normal standard 利率吧，那这样的话是一个非常 sharp 的反弹回去，所以如果你要买房的话，就现在要趁早，它就最好是越快越好。So actually, Chris, there's one question I asked you before. Actually, I talk about this to my clients before too.
Sure.
就是说 the question is, when you want to buy now or buy later. So the debate we had before is if you have a cash or you wanted to take a loan to buy. If you buy with the cash, right? So who cares? You can wait 2-3 years. And if you want to take a loan to buy, then you have to buy right now while the interest rate is low. 所以其实我跟 Chris 是上个星期还是忘了，我哪个时候我们俩还在聊天，我们经常会聊这个话题。然后因为我也跟我客户这样说嘛，我就跟他讲起这件事情来。我说的话，如果你要买房的话呢，其实如果你要是说你有现金买房，你用现金来买房的话，其实这个时间段没有太大的影响。当然的话，这个房价还是往上涨，你还不如现在买。那如果你要是真的要贷款买房的话呢，他那个什么，我的意见跟他意见是一致。如果你要贷款买房，越快越好。OK，
是明白，因为毕竟利率在这摆着嘛。我们知道还有一个问题是关于这个第3轮纾困金的。其实关于经济刺激法案毕竟通过了，所以很多人就把这个通货膨胀又拿上这台前了，说很多人说这个担心美国通货膨胀的问题。所以房地产是不是防止通货膨胀的最佳手段呢？房地产升值的速度肯定会超过通货膨胀的速度吗？
So another question is that about inflation. So the biggest concern most people have is the inflation, and so the key question is whether or not the inflation is going to outpace the real estate, because we'll talk about real estate being the best hedging strategy, right, for the inflation.
It's not the best, but it's a good one, right?
Right. Yeah, among a few options.
Right.
So what do you think? The real estate appreciation rate will eventually outpace, or will in average outpace the inflation rate.
Right. I am worried about inflation. I'm the most worried about inflation I've been in 25 years. But that's a lot different than saying we're going to have, say, the kind of inflation we saw in the 1970s, which was double digit. I don't expect to see that. I think it was going to heat up some, but I wouldn't argue that it's going to be to the level we saw back then. It's not, the idea that we're going to have like a hyperinflation, that's simply not true. Yes, there are inflationary pressures, but it's not going to be a recession causing type event.
OK， 他说他也很担心这个通货膨胀这个问题。他说他在过去25年都有担心这个问题他说但是不会像在1970几年那样双位数的那个通货膨胀的那个比例了。他说的会有 inflation， 但不会像那么可怕了。他说的话可能比较 mild 的一些。Would you say mild? Did you say mild or
Yeah, that's just it, right? I mean, again. And we don't even know if there's going to be inflation because the Federal Reserve still has an opportunity to pull back some of that liquidity and slow it down before we start to have a problem. So it's a risk, but it is not a certainty.
OK， 他说联储局的话，也有可能也会收回一些流动性，就是说这样的话可以从某种程度上限制它的那个 inflation。所以它的这个通货膨胀的话呢，它是有这个风险。但并不是说一定会，它是这样子。
明白了。好，下面就是关于这个投资商业地产的问题。以目前现在的市场情况来看，现在是不是投资商业地产的好时机呢？
I thought we killed this question already because
we seem to be repeating a lot of the questions, and I'm going to have to wrap up here.
I know. Chris has to get ready for dinner. So can we skip that question? We should maybe save for another time. Or do you want to just quickly touch on this? It's all about commercial real estate investment. Is a good time to invest in commercial real estate?
Right. Well, again, commercial real estate is in a bit of a stall, I guess would be the way to put it. It's not in a free fall. It's not suffering badly, but they're going to figure out what's going to happen next, right? My feeling is industrial is going to be a great place. Urban office is going to continue to be a great place. Destination retail, fancy malls will be a great place. But suburban office, suburban retail, those sectors are really going to suffer. So there's going to be some shakeout. I think you go into the commercial markets. I think there are opportunities there, but you have to be careful.
他的意思就是商业地产的话，这个总结来说，它的这个整体来说不是很明朗但是它肯定不会跌得很厉害，就是不会 free fall， 不会就是降得很迅猛的下降这种感觉。然后他说的话，他建议就是说可以考虑一些就是工业用厂房啊，或者是工业用的那种物业比如说像warehouse 啊，像仓库这个 industrial 它主要是说。另外的话就是市中心的一些办公楼市中心的办公楼可能大家也可能会有点疑惑，他们刚才没有解释，但是我跟大家稍微解释一下。因为因为疫情的话，很多公司的话都已经搬离了市中心。搬离市中心的话，那现在市中心很多办公楼是空置的，基本上它空置率比较高。那现在的话，如果是说那个什么公司的话需要 现在是很好谈，就是谈那个租约的时候，所以呢，你这样的话，因为控制那么高的话呢，控制率那么高，它就比较好讲那个租金嘛。所以这样的话，反过来说的话，因为长久等到它 recover 经济复苏的话，大家还是要回到那个市中心去工作，大部分人，因为那里的劳动力相对来说便宜一些，你在那个周边的话也找不到那么多劳动力，也相对来说贵一些。所以说他觉得那个市中心的办公楼还是不错的一个投资。另外他说的话就是可能像那个什么比较郊区啊或者城镇的那些办公楼就可能不是那么好了。另外的话就是那个 retail 就是说商铺。他也不是特别看好，但是的话，在一些比较说旅游区的一些商铺还是可以的，就比如高端的一些旅游区啊，像那些就是比较偏远的地方，可能就是不是人群特别多的。Chris, you mentioned about the high-end tourism or some shops, right? Retail shops should be.
Yeah, like destination retail, whether that's attached to like you said, a museum, or even think of the Grove, a super nice kind of place people want to go to be seen. That'll do fine. That's part of the human experience. The suburban mall, the suburban office building, those are the ones that are going to suffer.
Okay. Yep. All right. I think I covered that already.
OK.
还有什么问题吗？
我们下一个问题啊，是关于我们知道12月，其实我们做过一次采访节目嘛。您建议现在就买房子，我想买一套房子自住，但是呢，由于这个市场太火热，我没有能在竞价中这个胜出。那您建议我们等多久再买房子呢？直到今年夏天还是明年呢？
Okay, this question I think is a little bit repetitive because we answered already.
Cindy, I gotta go.
That's from last December, so I think we can skip that question. Yeah, 因为这个问题的话，
let's wrap. We gotta wrap here.
问题 ，Yeah, I know. So, 这个问题之前其实已经回答了，因为在其他的那个 question 里边我们已经 cover 了这个问题。如果他们还有什么问题的话 ，if they have any questions, they can email or text us.
Well, they can go to our website.
Yeah, that's what I say. I'll go to Chris 的 website.
好，没问题。如果大家有问题的话，可以是去这 Chris 的 website， 然后进行提问，好吧
？Yeah, 你可以 Google. You can also Google it. It's called the Beacon Economics. You can Google that, and you can go to their website, download their presentation, or you can text, even email the questions if you have. Okay. I know Chris, I'm getting ready for dinner. All right. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us today.
Thank you, Chris. 好，谢谢。
All right, bye, Chris.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
是的，好，感谢 Chris 啊，感谢 Cindy 啊。那 Cindy 这边有做什么样补充吗？因为 Chris 有这个时间的这个问题啊，所以最后请 Cindy 帮忙这个总结一下，补充一下，谢谢 Cindy。
我就干脆帮着回答一下刚才那个问题，就是说，
好，可以。
之前已经回答过了，因为他在那个讲他的 presentation 的时候，包括之前的问题，已经有回答这个问题。关于 last December 那个他说到就其实要尽快的买房，其实他现在的观点也是跟之前去年12月份做访谈的时候的一样的，就是说如果你要买房的话，尽快买。不要等。如果你要是贷款买房的话呢，尽快买。如果你现金的话，你还可以稍微可以等等都没有关系。但他说的房子的总体趋势的话呢，它房价还是往上涨的。至少在2到3年之内的话，它这个 inflation 是不会往上涨的。但是它如果一旦反弹回来的话，它的 inflation 那个利率的话是非常高的，就是 shoot it up， 不会是说慢慢的往上调，它是直接往上跳，因为它跳回到那个 normal 那个 level， 所以说大家如果是要真的计划买房，包括 Ray 你在内不要再拖了。
突然 Q 到我啊，这个事情，对，的确我这样有这个需求啊，这个我想换房子，当然得先卖再买嘛，就是由于这工作的关系嘛，所以一直在拖，一拖再拖。当然了，我也是会听从 Chris 的建议嘛，然后再看一下目前的这个。怎么样操作，先卖再买，主要是这个还是挺折腾人的，好吧？这毕竟家里有小孩子嘛。当然，这个也是同样，我是认为这个通货膨胀的问题并且我还有刚需，所以也抓紧时间吧。今天很感谢Chris 还有 Cindy 啊 ，Cindy 很辛苦。如果大家有任何的关于地产方面的疑问，或者是你也在关注，跟我一样关注地产的话，可以加一下 Cindy 的微信，麻烦导播切一下画面，在我们右下角这是 Cindy 的微信号，大家可以加一下，在他的朋友圈也有关于这个地产的最新的新闻资讯，所以说在那里你能了解到最新并且最专业的关于地产的各种信息。如果你有任何的或者买房卖房或者是投资商业地产等等的一些跟房地产有关的问题，也可以咨询一下 Cindy， 好吧？这边也有会对您这个最专业的一个解答。今天感谢 Cindy， 谢谢您，
谢谢 Ray。最
后呢 还是再次？
对，还再讲一句，就希望大家有
您说
有时间的话呢，可以如果有孩子们有所问题，有喜欢听的话题，或者是说想了解的地产有关的知识的话呢，欢迎大家可以上那个地产世界，我在那个 YouTube 上面有一个地产世界的频道，可以在那里留言、点赞、关注或者是转发，也非常感谢。另外的话，如果订阅我们的频道的话，也可以及时收到我们更频的通知啊。因为什么呢？因为每次我跟瑞每次有讨论的话，都是这个话题很困扰我们，因为我们希望的话是跟大家讲一些大家能够受益、能够学到一些那个地产知识的一些话题。所以说我希望的话，大家可以给我们留言，给我们一些建议，这样的话呢，也可以减少我们的困扰。Right
是的，好，最后再次感谢各位忠实观众的收看啊！欢迎你们在视频下方直接留言转发就可以了，并且让我们知道您感兴趣的房地产话题，谢谢。所以以上就是我们这一期视频了，记得点赞并分享出去我们下期节目再会，拜拜。
Thank you, Ray.